Have you ever stopped to think, how could a young man standing just 6 feet tall, in a league dominated by giants, not only survive but leave an everlasting mark on NBA history? And more than that, how could someone who grew up surrounded by violence, arrests, and injustice become one of the greatest cultural icons in sports history? Today we dive into the life of Allen Iverson, the man who didn't just challenge opponents on the court, but stood against society, the media, and even the NBA itself. A player who changed the way basketball is played, how athletes dress, how they express themselves, and how they defy the system. Get ready to discover the true story of a warrior who refused to be molded, who inspired millions to stay true to themselves, no matter the cost. This is the story of Allen Iverson, the icon who challenged everything and everyone. Before we dive in, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And tell us, what was the most unforgettable moment of Iverson's career for you? Drop your answer in the comments. Now, let's go back to the very beginning. Hampton, Virginia, early 1980s. In an America still bearing deep scars from racial segregation, a boy was born destined to defy all odds. His name was Allen Iverson. He was born on June 7, 1975, the product of the youth and courage of an Iverson, a teenage mother who, despite her young age and limited resources, vowed to protect her son from a world that seemed determined to crush the dreams of those who came from the bottom. Alone, without support from Allen's father, and turned the streets of Hampton into her personal battleground, fighting every day to secure the bare necessities for survival. The house where Allen grew up could barely be called a home. It was small, cramped, and often dark, with frequent cuts to electricity and running water. Rain poured inside as much as it did outside. The cracks on the walls were silent witnesses to the nights when Anne cried quietly, wondering how she could keep Allen safe. The surrounding neighborhood was harsh, almost cruel. Children played near alleys where drugs destroyed lives. Violence was more common than hope. But Allen, even at such a young age, carried a light in his eyes that could not be extinguished. He was fast, agile, a human lightning bolt who seemed not just to run races, but to run away from the fate the world was trying to impose on him. The basketball became an extension of his soul. When Allen held the ball, the weight of the world disappeared and he was free. At the same time, football was also a part of his life. Iverson was a sensation in any sport he touched. He played quarterback and defensive back, defying anyone who thought his size would hold him back. Those who watched him knew they were witnessing something rare, something extraordinary. It wasn't just talent. It was hunger. It was survival. On the streets of Hampton, his talent became legend before he even entered high school. Residents would gather around the makeshift courts, eyes locked on the boy who seemed to defy gravity and bend the rules of the game to his will. It was as if he was always fighting, not just for points or victories, but for his own dignity. But Iverson's childhood was never just about sports victories. By the age of 13, he already knew the brutal weight of death and loss. Close friends were taken by street violence. He witnessed more friends being imprisoned than birthdays being celebrated. The line between survival and defeat was razor thin, and Allen walked it every single day. Even in the darkest moments, there was one place where he felt invincible: the basketball court. When the ball went up, he transformed. There was no hunger, no violence, no fear. There was only him, the game, and the certainty that there, in that sacred space, he had control over his own destiny. Allen's first audiences were his own neighbors. People hardened by tragedy, who found in the young prodigy's dazzling plays a rare glimmer of hope, a brief spark of joy. Every dribble, every improbable crossover, every fearless dunk drew smiles that seemed impossible in an environment so scarred by pain. But the path Allen needed to walk was far from safe. The traps of poverty, marginalization, and racism were everywhere, and a single misstep could cause everything to slip away. Allen knew this. Every step was an invisible battle not to become another tragic statistic. Allen Iverson's childhood in Hampton wasn't just difficult. It was a daily battle for physical, emotional, and spiritual survival. Every morning, stepping outside his door, he carried the weight of a world that offered him nothing for free. And still, with worn-out sneakers and stubborn hope, he ran. Not just to win the game. He ran to save his own life. It was in this brutal reality that the character of one of basketball's greatest legends was forged. And what came next would test Allen in even harsher ways. The year was 1993. Allen Iverson was only 17 years old, carrying not just his family's hopes on his shoulders, but the dreams of an entire community that saw in him a rare beacon of possibility. He was, without exaggeration, the greatest athletic talent Hampton had ever produced, respected in both football and basketball. His name was already echoing in the conversations of college scouts. Scholarships, dreams of a better future, a new life, everything finally seemed within reach. But fate once again had set a cruel trap. On what seemed like an ordinary night, Allen and his friends decided to go to Circle Lanes, a popular bowling alley in town. What started as a night of fun, a brief escape from daily pressures, quickly spiraled into tragedy. Arguments between black and white youths, fueled by the racial tensions still simmering beneath the surface of the city, escalated into violence. Pushing, punches, chairs flying through the air. In the middle of the chaos, Allen was accused of assaulting a white woman with a chair. There were no clear video recordings. The accounts of those involved contradicted each other. And yet, the justice system seemed to have already made its choice. In a society marked by prejudice, the black boy, prodigy or not, was guilty before he could even defend himself. Iverson was arrested. He wasn't just another teenager in handcuffs. He was a symbol being judged, not for his actions but for his origins, his appearance, and his audacity to dream big. Throughout the trial, the heavy sense of injustice hung in the air. Witnesses changed their stories. Evidence didn't add up. But none of that mattered. The sentence was devastating: 15 years in prison with 10 years mandatory. 15 years. For a young man who had not even completed high school, who was just one small push away from changing his life forever. Imagine the brutality of that reality. At 17, when he should have been leading his team to a state championship, Iverson was shackled, thrown into a cold cell and forgotten by the system. The prison walls weren't just concrete. They were made of hopelessness. Inside that cell, Allen wasn't the future of the NBA. He wasn't the boy with the impossible crossovers. He was just another number in the prison system. The hard floor, the cold meals, the hollow eyes of fellow inmates. Each sunrise made the promise of freedom feel more distant. Outside, and Iverson refused to accept the fate they were trying to impose on her son. She sold what little she had, begged lawyers for help, knocked on doors that had never truly been open to people like her. The black community of Hampton, civil rights movements, and even celebrities began to raise their voices in support. The case, once buried, started gaining national attention. The pressure mounted until, finally, after 4 long months behind bars, the governor of Virginia granted Allen Iverson a pardon. The boy walked out of prison, but the world he returned to was no longer the same. The scar of that experience would never fully heal. Iverson had lost his faith in institutions. He had lost friends, time, and innocence, but he had gained something even more powerful, a fire that burned inside him, hotter and more relentless than ever. He didn't just want to win anymore. He needed to win. For his mother. For his city. For everyone who had been judged without a voice. It was the beginning of a journey that, against all odds, was still only just beginning. The next chapter of this story of redemption would be written in a place where Allen would find not just a team, but a true mentor. His destiny now pointed to Georgetown University. When Allen Iverson left prison, his soul carried more scars than his body could show. The world that once celebrated him as a rising star now viewed him with suspicion. Many of the doors that had opened when he was just the prodigy from Hampton were now slammed shut without ceremony. Amid this bleak landscape, one man dared to see beyond the prejudice and the headlines. His name was John Thompson, the legendary coach of Georgetown University. Thompson was much more than a coach. He was a living institution in college basketball, a leader who understood the complexity of being young, black, and talented in a world that often confused freedom with threat. When he decided to recruit Allen, he knew he was putting his own reputation on the line for a young man that society labeled a problem. But Thompson saw what many could not: Iverson's fierce heart, his raw courage, and his tireless soul. When Allen arrived at Georgetown, he didn't just find a new court. He found a refuge. Even though the pressure was immense, the environment was different. It was an arena of discipline, respect, and rebuilding. At first, Iverson was suspicious of everything. Every strange look, every whisper in the hallways, brought back the ghosts of the injustice he had endured. But Thompson, with his firm and fatherly presence, didn't allow Allen to lose his way. He pushed him hard in practice, demanded more in the locker room, but above all, protected the boy from the cruel weight of public opinion. At Georgetown, Iverson began to be reborn. Physically, he remained unstoppable. His speed was inhuman. His crossover was a hypnotic spectacle that left defenders on their knees. But what truly blossomed was his competitive maturity. Allen no longer played just to win games. He played to justify the faith Thompson had placed in him, to honor his mother who had never given up, and to prove that even after trying to bury him, the system had failed. His debut in the NCAA was explosive. With impressive scoring averages and performances that seemed straight out of a movie, Iverson quickly became the main attraction of college basketball. Each game was a statement. I'm here. And no one will erase me. Iverson's style was pure hurricane. He didn't just score, he dominated space, inspired teammates, intimidated opponents. His improbable layups, his devastating crossovers, and his unstoppable energy turned Georgetown not just into a competitive team, but a national sensation. Fans packed the arenas. The media, once so critical, had to surrender. Georgetown was once again a powerhouse. And at the center of that rebirth stood the young man, just 6 feet tall, carrying a motor of emotions inside his chest. Allen Iverson led Georgetown to 2 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances, restoring the university's glory and expanding his own legend. But beyond victories and statistics, he restored something even more valuable: his dignity. In the eyes of the world, he was no longer just the boy from a bowling alley incident. He was an extraordinary athlete, a fulfilled promise, a force of nature that could not be contained. At Georgetown, Allen Iverson was not only reborn as a player, he was reborn as a symbol. And the next stage of his journey would no longer be on college courts. It was time to step onto the greatest stage in the world. The NBA awaited. The Felt Forum in New York buzzed with energy that historic night, June 26, 1996. Cameras flashed non-stop. Agents whispered in the corridors. Young players, dressed in impeccable suits, wore nervous smiles and ambitious eyes. It was NBA draft night, one of the most anticipated in history. Among the candidates were towering giants, athletes with staggering statistics, faces already polished for marketing campaigns. And then there was Allen Iverson. Sitting quietly, wearing a suit that seemed to be his only concession to the occasion, Iverson didn't flash the rehearsed smiles of the other candidates. His intense eyes said more than 1,000 words. They carried the hunger of someone who had seen rock bottom. The courage of someone who knew that every step taken to get there was a victory over destiny. He measured just 6 feet tall, almost diminutive in a world of colossi. But his presence filled the entire room. When David Stern, the NBA commissioner, stepped onto the stage with the traditional envelope in hand, the tension became almost unbearable. The moment that would change Allen Iverson's future, and the NBA's, was just seconds away. Stern opened the envelope, smiled slightly, and announced, with the first pick in the 1996 NBA draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Allen Iverson from Georgetown University. The room exploded. Amid the applause and the frenzy of camera flashes, Iverson stood up. Every step toward the stage resonated with the weight of everything he had endured. The childhood in Hampton, the injustice of prison, the redemption at Georgetown. As he shook Stern's hand, he wasn't just signing a contract. He was carving a clear message into the world. You tried to bury me. Now watch me conquer. Iverson's selection as the first overall pick was historic for many reasons. It was rare to see a player so small by league standards be the first name called. It was even rarer to see someone with such a turbulent background break through prejudice and doubt to reach the top. The city of Philadelphia, starved for a hero after years of frustration, embraced Allen with the enthusiasm of recognizing one of their own. The connection was instant, almost visceral. Iverson, with his fearless, rebellious, and authentic style, seemed tailor-made for a city that prided itself on daily battles and courage against adversity. While other rookies from that draft, names like Kobe Bryant, Steve Nash, and Ray Allen, also prepared to carve out their paths to greatness, Iverson already seemed different. He didn't just want to win games. He wanted to change the game. And he would. With his killer crossovers, his electrifying speed, and his indomitable soul, Allen Iverson would not just become another rising star. He would spark a cultural revolution that would forever transform the way basketball was played, viewed, and lived. The 1996 NBA draft was not just the beginning of Allen Iverson's career. It was the birth of an era. An era where authenticity became more powerful than following rules. An era where willpower mattered more than height. An era where the streets finally had a voice on the brightest stage of the sport. And Allen Iverson was that voice. The year 2001 dawned with a different kind of energy for Allen Iverson. He was no longer just a promise, a raw talent on the rise. Now he was a veteran with visible scars, determined to turn pain into glory. Since his arrival in the NBA, Iverson had been breaking all the molds. He was small for professional basketball but huge in attitude, even bigger in heart. His bold style, supernatural speed, and raw authenticity had already won over countless fans. But this year he would reach something greater, definitive consecration. The 2000 to 2001 season was, for Iverson, a masterpiece of pure intensity. In every game he seemed to carry not just the Philadelphia 76ers jersey, but the entire soul of the city on his back. Philadelphia was not a city that forgave weakness. It was a land of workers, of fighters, of people who knew that victory only came through sweat and struggle. And Iverson, with his uncompromising grit, was the living reflection of that identity. Averaging 31.1 points per game, he led the league in scoring. His performances were a series of near-theatrical spectacles, games of 40-50 points, crossing over defenders who were bigger, stronger, but never more determined. It wasn't just physical skill. It was emotional energy that seemed to fuel every dribble, every leap, every shot. Iverson played as if he were fighting for survival with every possession. The Philadelphia 76ers, fueled by their relentless star, shocked everyone. They defeated teams considered far superior, surviving games where victory seemed impossible, turning every court they visited into conquered enemy territory. And in the middle of it all, Allen Iverson shone with the fury of a man who knew this was his moment. When the official announcement came, it was pure catharsis. The announcer's voice echoed across the basketball world. The 2001 NBA Most Valuable Player is Allen Iverson from the Philadelphia 76ers. As he walked onto the stage to receive the MVP trophy, Iverson carried more than just stats. He carried the story of his childhood in Hampton, his mother's struggle, the dark nights of prison, the unwavering faith of Georgetown. He dressed his way, bandana, chains, and that defiant look that had become his signature. He didn't wear masks for society. He didn't dress to please anyone's standards. He was, as always, himself, and that made the moment even more powerful. With a voice cracking from emotion, he dedicated the award to his mother and Iverson, to the city of Philadelphia, and to everyone who, like him, had been underestimated, ignored, discarded. The golden trophy in his hands wasn't just a sports achievement. It was a symbol. Proof that it was indeed possible to win, without abandoning your roots, without betraying your identity. Allen Iverson hadn't just won games. He had moved hearts. He had reignited dreams. He had shown the world that true greatness isn't measured by height, nor by multimillion-dollar contracts, but by the ability to stay true to yourself against everything and everyone. And that magical season still had an epic chapter left to be written. The NBA Finals, where Iverson would face the very best, on the grandest stage of all. He didn't just want to compete. He wanted, once again, to defy the impossible. June 2001. The Staples Center in Los Angeles looked like an invincible fortress. The Los Angeles Lakers, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, entered the finals undefeated throughout the playoffs. They dominated the league with the arrogance of those who knew they were unbeatable. On the other side of the court stood a team considered inferior, a team that had defied all logic to get there. The Philadelphia 76ers, led by Allen Iverson, the small giant who carried in his eyes the fury of a man who had already defied the entire world and survived. The betting houses gave the Sixers no real chance. Analysts predicted a sweep, an easy victory for Los Angeles, a mere formality before the inevitable celebration. But Iverson never cared about predictions. When the ball went up in Game 1, what unfolded was not a tactical duel. It wasn't a balanced match. It was a war of emotions. Iverson attacked the basket as if each point was a matter of honor. He cut through defenses, dribbled past giants, floated above the outstretched arms of his opponents. Every dribble was a challenge. Every made shot, a response to those who dared doubt him. The arena erupted with every play. But Iverson seemed deaf to the noise. His focus was absolute. 48 points. Right in the heart of the champion's house. When the game went into overtime, the atmosphere at Staples Center was no longer celebratory. It was filled with fear. Something no one had foreseen was about to happen. And then came the moment that would transcend decades and become legend. With less than 2 minutes remaining on the clock, Iverson received the ball near the sideline. In front of him stood young Tyronn Lue, tasked with the near-impossible mission: stop the hurricane named Allen Iverson. Iverson danced with the ball. First a feint to the right, then a hesitation move backward followed by a quick dribble to the left. Lue tried to keep up but slipped. Fell to the floor. Time seemed to freeze. Allen Iverson, cold as ice, didn't hesitate. He calmly launched a shot over the fallen defender. The ball, as if guided by a force greater than the moment, swished through the net. But what made that instant eternal was not just the bucket. It was what came next. In a move that required no words, Iverson calmly stepped over Tyronn Lue, looking forward, without taunting, without celebration, simply affirming with every fiber of his being. You tried to knock me down. But even when I fall, I move forward. The Staples Center fell silent. The worldwide broadcast captured that magical second, immortalizing it as one of the greatest moments in NBA history. The Sixers won that game, ending the Lakers' undefeated run and sending a powerful message. It doesn't matter how big your opponent is. It doesn't matter what the odds say. When your heart is bigger than any statistic, miracles happen. Although the Lakers would recover and eventually win the championship, that Game 1 became more than just a win for Allen Iverson. It became his coronation. That night, he proved that true greatness is not measured by championship rings. It's measured in moments that transcend time. It's measured by the ability to defy the impossible and leave the world speechless. And Allen Iverson, standing barely 6 feet tall but with a soul the size of the universe, had become eternal. The world saw Allen Iverson as a phenomenon on the court. But off the court, he became something many feared: a force that refused to bow to rules, a symbol of resistance in a league that until then had preferred athletes molded into socially acceptable ideals. After the 2001 finals, Allen didn't just maintain his level of play. He became even more authentic, even more defiant. And the price of that authenticity soon began to show. Iverson rejected the NBA's unwritten codes about how a player should behave and present himself. While many wore expensive suits and hid their tattoos under long sleeves, Iverson showed up in oversized t-shirts, heavy chains, and a proudly tied bandana. His body was a living mural of scars and stories, painted in black ink, visible to those who wanted to see, or to those who didn't. This posture made people uncomfortable. Commissioners, executives, and sponsors didn't just see Iverson as a sports icon. They saw him as a threat to the carefully curated image of the league. The institutional response came quickly and coldly. Fines started piling up. Public statements demanded better behavior from athletes. In 2005, the NBA implemented a new dress code, forcing all players to dress formally at league-related events. Behind the measure, the message was clear: control the image, standardize the appearance, crush the rebellion. The target wasn't hard to identify. It was Allen Iverson and everything he represented. But Allen was never someone you could mold. Every fine he paid was a reaffirmation that his freedom was worth more than any paycheck or polite applause. His rebellion was not about vanity. It was about identity. Behind the scenes, his relationships with coaches and executives also suffered. Iverson missed practices, clashed with coaches who tried to rein him in, and refused to be just another obedient piece in the NBA's chessboard. The tension reached its peak in a press conference that would become as iconic as any play he ever made. When criticized for missing practices, Iverson, overwhelmed with frustration and raw honesty, immortalized a phrase: "We're talking about practice. Not a game. Not the game I love. We're talking about practice." The media spun the moment as a display of ego and irresponsibility. But behind that moment was real pain, a profound exhaustion. Iverson carried open wounds, dealt with personal losses, and fought daily to be accepted as he was. No masks, no disguises. He never asked to be an idol. He never begged to be a role model. He just wanted to play basketball his way, to represent those who had never been given a voice, to show that greatness could rise from the streets, from pain, from authenticity. This stance cost him endorsement deals, created barriers in negotiations, and fueled criticisms that would echo for years. But Iverson had no regrets. He understood that being true to yourself doesn't always bring easy applause. He understood that rebels, though misunderstood in their time, are the ones who shape the future. Every question practice, every fine paid, every harsh criticism reinforced what Iverson had known since his days in Hampton. The path for those who dare to be authentic is harder. But it is also the only one capable of leaving deep, permanent marks on history. And Allen Iverson was carving his legacy with every bold step he took, both on and off the court. Allen Iverson always knew his influence extended far beyond the court. Even without the initial intention of becoming a cultural symbol, his lifestyle, his choices, and his stance ended up shaping a whole new generation. Before him, NBA players' appearances followed an unspoken script. Flawless suits, clean-cut hair, carefully rehearsed speeches. The athlete was seen almost like a corporate representative, as far removed from the streets as possible. Iverson shattered that image with the same ferocity he attacked opposing defenses. He brought the visual language of hip-hop into the heart of the NBA. Bandanas tied tight, heavy chains swinging across his chest, t-shirts 3 times his size, baggy pants, perfectly braided cornrows. Each detail wasn't just a style choice. It was a declaration of belonging, a reminder of where he came from and who he represented. The tattoos that covered his body told stories of loss, friendship, and struggle. They weren't fashion accessories. They were battle scars. Each one a chapter of his life etched into his skin. Street culture, long marginalized by the sports and advertising elite, gained a global stage through Iverson. And with it came new fans, new voices, and new narratives. Reebok, recognizing the power Allen carried, bet everything on his authentic charisma. The release of the Question sneaker became a phenomenon. Young people who had never set foot on a basketball court lined up just to wear a piece of Iverson's rebellious spirit. In the world of music, his influence was palpable. Jay-Z, Nelly, Jadakiss, and so many other hip-hop artists didn't just see Allen as a basketball player, they saw him as one of their own. Someone who had crossed the trenches of poverty, carved out his place without asking permission, and stayed true to his essence despite the pressures. His image graced the covers of magazines like Slam, was referenced in rap songs, and was revered at block parties and in neighborhoods far from the bright lights. Iverson wasn't just an athlete. He was a movement. The aesthetic he popularized spread like wildfire. Street ball gained the status of art. The way of dressing, expressing oneself, and resisting became a cultural reference point. And for the first time, the NBA had to accept that what happened in the streets had value, had weight, had authenticity. Allen Iverson paved the way for future generations to be more than just players. They could be voices, faces, attitudes. If today we see athletes like LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, and Damian Lillard, men who openly celebrate their roots and their culture without fear, it's because Iverson paved that road under heavy criticism, fines, and sideways glances. His legacy off the court is just as grand as his points and trophies. He democratized the NBA for the streets, gave representation to those who had never before been invited to center stage. Allen Iverson showed that sports didn't need to be polished to be respected. That authenticity, even when uncomfortable, is what truly transforms generations. And without ever intending to be a hero, without scripts, without rehearsals, he became a legend who changed not only basketball, but culture itself. Allen Iverson never presented himself as a savior, never promised to be a perfect role model. He didn't live to meet other people's expectations, nor did he mold his actions to fit the comfort of those watching from afar. He was real. Brutally real. On the court, he was a force that redefined the point guard position. He turned speed into art, dribbling into poetry, audacity into method. He was small in stature but massive in presence. Every crossover he executed, every shot he made among the giants, was an act of defiance, against statistics, against prejudice. Off the court, Allen Iverson went far beyond numbers. He embodied the spirit of millions who grew up being told they weren't good enough. That they didn't speak the right way, didn't dress the right way, didn't come from the right place. By refusing to bow down, Iverson taught that resistance itself is a revolutionary act. He proved that authenticity comes at a high price, but that the freedom to be yourself can't be bought or bargained. His career was marked by triumphs and falls, by cheers and boos. It was loved and criticized, glorified and misunderstood. But above all, it was lived with a rare intensity, the kind that never allows for indifference. Allen Iverson's greatness isn't just about being one of the best players of his generation. It's about being one of the bravest men in the history of sports. He challenged coaches who tried to mold him. He challenged executives who tried to tame him. He challenged rules that tried to silence him. He challenged an entire culture that believed acceptance required hiding who you are. Allen Iverson left us an eternal lesson. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how many times they tell you that you're not enough. If you have the courage to stay true to who you are, you can change the world. He showed us that the greatest heroes aren't perfect. They are flawed, passionate, true. And because of that, Allen Iverson will forever be more than just a name in the record books, more than a trophy on a shelf, more than a number in historical rankings. He will eternally be the symbol that authenticity, above all else, is invincible. And his legend will live on, pulsing in every new generation that refuses to be silenced, that dares to challenge, that believes being true is the greatest triumph of all. Allen Iverson didn't just challenge everything and everyone. He won. If this story of fight, authenticity, and overcoming inspired you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Comment below, what was the most emotional moment of Allen Iverson's career for you? We want to hear your story. And get ready, because in the next video we'll dive into the journey of another genius who also defied fate and became eternal. The story of Tracy McGrady, the master of the impossible seconds. Stay tuned, because here, legends never die. They only inspire.